The GlobalConnect Incorporated conference room falls silent as CEO Reginald Pemberton stops mid-laugh, his condescending grin frozen on his face. Seconds earlier, he had mocked the 17-year-old black girl sitting across the table during her scholarship interview. 12 languages? Really? He'd scoffed, leaning back in his leather chair. Sweetheart, I took French in college and can barely order a croissant. What are you really here for? Now Amara Okonkwo stands calmly and begins speaking. In flawless Mandarin, she addresses the Chinese VP. In rapid French, she responds to a question from Claire Dubois. In perfect Japanese, she converses with Kenji Yamamoto. Then Russian, Arabic, Spanish, German, Portuguese, Korean, Hindi, and Igbo flow effortlessly from her lips. Each language native perfect. Each transition seamless. CEO Pemberton's jaw drops. The other executives lean forward, stunned. VP Dubois whispers, Mon Dieu, she's really doing it. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the linguistics professor observing the interview, smiles quietly. She'd warned them not to underestimate this girl. Amara finishes her demonstration and sits down, her eyes meeting Pemberton's with quiet dignity. As I was saying, she continues in English, I speak 12 languages fluently. Would you like me to continue, or shall we discuss the scholarship? The CEO who moments ago had dismissed her as a liar now realizes he's witnessing genius. And his humiliation is just beginning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 48 hours earlier, Amara Okonkwo had sat in her modest bedroom in Oakland, California, reviewing her application materials for the GlobalConnect International Scholarship Competition. At 17, she was one of 50 finalists selected from over 10,000 applicants worldwide to compete for a full-ride scholarship to any university, plus a $100,000 grant for language and technology innovation projects. Her bedroom walls told the story of her linguistic journey. Charts of verb conjugations in a dozen languages, maps marking countries where each language was spoken, and handwritten notes in various scripts covering her desk. The small space had become her language laboratory, where she had spent countless hours transforming curiosity into mastery. Amara's path to polyglot fluency had begun at age 4 when her parents, Nigerian immigrants Dr. Chioma and Ade Okonkwo, had insisted she maintain her heritage language Igbo while learning English. Her mother, a physician who had emigrated from Lagos, and her father, an engineer, understood that linguistic diversity was both cultural preservation and cognitive advantage. In Nigeria, speaking multiple languages is normal, not exceptional, her mother had explained when Amara was young. Your grandmother speaks Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, and English. We want you to understand that your mind is capable of holding many languages, many perspectives. But Amara had taken this foundation far beyond her parents' expectations. At age 6, she had asked her father to teach her his rudimentary French from his college years. At 7, she begged her mother's friend, Mrs. Wu, to teach her Mandarin. By age 9, she was teaching herself Spanish through library books and online resources. What distinguished Amara from casual language learners was her systematic approach and natural aptitude. She didn't just memorize vocabulary. She studied linguistic structures, understanding how different languages organize thought and express concepts. She practiced with native speakers whenever possible, volunteering at the International Rescue Committee to help translate for refugees while learning from their authentic speech patterns. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, her linguistics professor mentor from UC Berkeley who ran a Saturday enrichment program for gifted students, had recognized Amara's exceptional abilities when she was 14. Tanaka, herself fluent in 7 languages, had never encountered a teenager with such natural facility for phonetics, grammar acquisition, and cultural context. Amara doesn't just learn languages, she inhabits them, Tanaka had told colleagues. She thinks in each language rather than translating from English. That's what separates true polyglots from people who've studied multiple languages. By age 17, Amara had achieved genuine fluency in 12 languages. English, Igbo, French, Mandarin, Spanish, Japanese, Arabic, German, Russian, Portuguese, Korean, and Hindi. She had studied each for at least 2 years, with daily practice maintaining and deepening her proficiency across all 12 simultaneously. Her family's modest circumstances had made this achievement even more remarkable. While wealthy students could afford private tutors, immersion programs, and study abroad opportunities, Amara had relied on free online resources, community volunteers, library materials, and her own disciplined self-study. Her parents supported her passion but couldn't fund expensive language programs. The GlobalConnect Scholarship represented a transformative opportunity. The competition required finalists to demonstrate not just language skills, but also innovative thinking about how multilingual abilities could address global challenges. Amara's application had proposed developing AI translation tools that preserved cultural nuance rather than producing literal, but contextually inappropriate translations. Current translation software treats language like code to be converted, her proposal explained. But language carries culture, emotion, and context that literal translation misses. A human polyglot can help train AI to recognize these nuances. Her high school guidance counselor, Mr. O'Sullivan, had been skeptical about her chances. Amara, you're competing against applicants from elite prep schools with international travel experience and professional language instruction. Your abilities are impressive, but the competition is designed for privileged students. But Dr. Tanaka had encouraged her to apply despite the odds. Your talent is extraordinary, and your perspective as someone who learned languages without wealth is valuable. Don't let anyone convince you that genius requires privilege. The scholarship competition would take place over 3 days at GlobalConnect's San Francisco headquarters. 50 finalists would participate in interviews, language demonstrations, and collaborative problem-solving exercises. The selection committee included corporate executives, academic linguists, and international diplomacy experts. Amara had prepared meticulously, reviewing advanced grammar in each of her 12 languages, practicing complex topics like technology, philosophy, and global economics in multiple linguistic contexts, and preparing examples of how her multilingual abilities had already contributed to her community through volunteer translation work. What she couldn't prepare for was CEO Reginald Pemberton's prejudice and condescension. The automatic assumption that a black teenager from a public school couldn't possibly possess the ability she claimed. His dismissiveness would prove to be a crucial mistake that would transform the entire competition. That Tuesday morning, as Amara rode the BART train into San Francisco, wearing her carefully chosen professional outfit from the thrift store, she carried both excitement about the opportunity and apprehension about being judged before demonstrating her abilities. Her younger brother Kelechi had hugged her before she left. "Go show them what genius looks like," he had said, his faith in his sister absolute. Amara smiled at the memory as the train emerged from the tunnel with San Francisco's skyline glittering ahead. She had no way of knowing that within hours, she would be standing in a corporate conference room, proving to a dismissive billionaire that brilliance transcends circumstances and that assumptions based on appearance are the refuge of those too limited to recognize talent when it challenges their prejudices. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The GlobalConnect headquarters occupied a gleaming glass tower in San Francisco's financial district, its lobby decorated with flags representing the 127 countries where the company operated. Amara arrived with the other scholarship finalists, immediately noticing the demographic composition, overwhelmingly white and Asian, almost all from visible wealth based on their designer clothes and casual mentions of international schools and study abroad experiences. Emma Johansson, a blonde 18-year-old from Connecticut, was describing her summer in Paris when she noticed Amara. "Oh, did you also study abroad? Which language program?" "I didn't study abroad," Amara replied pleasantly. "I learned languages at home, in Oakland, through free resources and community volunteers." The subtle shift in Emma's expression, from friendly interest to polite skepticism, was familiar to Amara. Wealthy students often assumed language mastery required expensive programs rather than discipline and natural ability. The morning session included a written examination testing linguistic knowledge across multiple languages. Amara worked steadily through sections covering grammar, vocabulary, cultural context, and translation challenges. She noticed other finalists struggling with certain sections, frequently skipping questions in languages where their knowledge was less secure. During the lunch break, she overheard several finalists discussing their language counts. Most claimed fluency in 3 to 5 languages, though Amara suspected some were inflating casual study into claims of true proficiency. "I'm so nervous about the oral examinations," Sofia Martinez confided to a group. "I can read Portuguese fine, but speaking fluently under pressure is different." Amara stayed quiet, not wanting to seem boastful by mentioning her 12 languages. She had learned that people often reacted with skepticism rather than congratulations when they learned about her abilities. The afternoon brought individual interviews with the scholarship selection committee. Amara's time slot was 2:30 p.m., and she waited nervously outside the conference room while the previous candidate finished. When the door opened, CEO Reginald Pemberton emerged, having decided to personally observe some interviews as a publicity opportunity for GlobalConnect's commitment to education. At 48, Pemberton had built his tech empire through aggressive business tactics and personal brilliance in software development. But his success had also fed an ego that made him dismissive of those he perceived as beneath his achievement level. He noticed Amara waiting and made assumptions based on her appearance. A black teenager in thrift store professional, who clearly didn't fit his mental image of scholarship winners. "You're one of the finalists?" he asked, his tone carrying barely concealed surprise. "Yes, sir. Amara Okonkwo. My interview is next." Pemberton glanced at her file, which the executive assistant handed him. His expression shifted to open skepticism when he saw her claimed language proficiencies. "This says you speak 12 languages fluently. That's quite a claim for someone so young." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Amara had faced doubters before, but having the CEO himself question her abilities before she even entered the interview room was particularly discouraging. "Yes, sir. English, Igbo, French, Mandarin, Spanish, Japanese, Arabic, German, Russian, Portuguese, Korean, and Hindi." Pemberton laughed. Not friendly amusement, but mockery thinly disguised as disbelief. 12 languages? Really? Sweetheart, I took French in college and can barely order a croissant. Are you sure you're not confusing basic phrases with actual fluency? Several executives within earshot stopped their conversations, drawn by the CEO's tone. This was exactly the kind of public put-down Pemberton was known for, establishing dominance by questioning others' credentials. Amara felt heat rising in her face, a mixture of embarrassment and anger that she struggled to control. "Sir, I've studied each language for at least 2 years, practiced daily, and have achieved genuine fluency verified by native speakers." "Uh-huh," Pemberton replied dismissively. "And I suppose you learned all this at your public school in Oakland? With what resources exactly?" The classism beneath his questions was obvious. The assumption that quality language education required privilege, that a student from modest circumstances couldn't achieve what wealthy students with expensive tutors might struggle to accomplish. Dr. Tanaka, who had been waiting in the conference room as Amara's recommending professor, heard the exchange and emerged quickly. "Mr. Pemberton, Amara is the most gifted language learner I've encountered in 30 years of teaching linguistics. Her claims are absolutely accurate." But Pemberton was already committed to his skepticism, viewing Tanaka's defense as misguided advocacy rather than expert assessment. "Dr. Tanaka, I appreciate your support for your student, but surely you understand the difference between classroom competence and genuine fluency. This young lady is making extraordinary claims that require extraordinary evidence." "Then let me provide that evidence," Amara said quietly, finding her voice despite the humiliation of being questioned so publicly. "I'm happy to demonstrate my abilities in any or all of the languages I've claimed." Pemberton glanced at his watch, clearly considering this a waste of time, but sensing an opportunity to make his point about inflated credentials. Fine, let's go into the conference room. I'm curious to see this fluency you're so confident about. As they entered the conference room, where VP Claire Dubois, CTO Dev Patel, Executive Assistant Kenji Yamamoto, and the other judges waited, Pemberton announced, "This candidate claims to speak 12 languages fluently. I've asked her to demonstrate because, frankly, that seems implausible for a 17-year-old from a public school." His tone made clear he expected to expose exaggeration, to teach a lesson about the importance of honest credentials. What he didn't anticipate was that he was about to receive a lesson himself, about the dangers of underestimating genius simply because it emerged from circumstances he didn't respect. The conference room's tension was palpable as Amara stood before the panel, her hands steady despite her racing heart. CEO Pemberton settled into a chair with the satisfied expression of someone about to expose a fraud, while the official judges looked uncomfortable with his hostile takeover of their evaluation process. "Let's start with something simple," Pemberton suggested with barely concealed sarcasm. "Can you introduce yourself in these 12 languages you claim?" Dr. Tanaka started to object to the condescending framing, but Amara gave her mentor a slight shake of her head. She understood that Pemberton's dismissiveness was about to become his humiliation, and she preferred to let her abilities speak rather than arguing about his attitude. "Of course," Amara replied calmly. She began in Mandarin, introducing herself with perfect tonal precision to the stunned Chinese executives in the room. The fluency was immediately obvious. This wasn't rehearsed phrases, but natural, native-level speech. She transitioned seamlessly into French, speaking to VP Dubois with the Parisian accent and colloquial expressions that only came from deep study. Dubois's eyebrows rose in surprised appreciation. Then Japanese, addressing Kenji Yamamoto with appropriate honorific language that demonstrated understanding of cultural context beyond mere vocabulary. Then Russian with the complex case system perfectly executed, Arabic with proper classical and colloquial distinctions, Spanish with native-like fluency, German with precise grammar, Portuguese distinguishing Brazilian and European variants, Korean with polite formal register, Hindi with proper phonetics, and finally Igbo, her heritage language, spoken with the warmth of family connection. The demonstration took less than 2 minutes, but its impact was devastating to Pemberton's assumptions. The executives who spoke these languages natively looked at each other in amazement, confirming what they were hearing. This wasn't casual competence, but genuine mastery. "That's impressive," Pemberton admitted grudgingly, though his tone suggested he was searching for ways to minimize what he'd just witnessed. "Though introducing yourself is relatively simple, can you discuss complex topics?" The continued skepticism despite clear evidence triggered a response from VP Dubois, who had been growing increasingly uncomfortable with her CEO's behavior. "Rex, perhaps we should proceed with the normal interview format rather than—" "No, it's fine," Amara interrupted politely. "Mr. Pemberton wants to verify my abilities. I'm happy to discuss complex topics." She looked directly at the CEO, her dignity intact despite his attempts to diminish her. "Would you like me to explain quantum computing concepts in Mandarin, discuss political philosophy in German, analyze economic theory in Russian, or perhaps debate artificial intelligence ethics in French?" The offer was delivered without arrogance, but with quiet confidence that made clear she could deliver on any of these challenges. CTO Dev Patel leaned forward with sudden interest, recognizing that they might be witnessing something extraordinary. Pemberton, backed into a corner by his own challenge, chose the topic he understood best. Explain how machine learning neural networks function in Mandarin first, then translate and elaborate in Japanese and German. It was a deliberately difficult technical topic in languages where specialized vocabulary would challenge even accomplished speakers. The other judges looked concerned that Pemberton was sabotaging what should have been a supportive evaluation. Amara nodded and began speaking fluent Mandarin, explaining neural network architecture, backpropagation algorithms, and deep learning concepts with technical precision. Her explanation demonstrated not just language ability, but genuine understanding of complex computer science principles. She then shifted to Japanese, continuing the explanation while adding details about how neural networks mimic human brain function. Her technical vocabulary was perfect, her grammar complex and sophisticated. Finally, she moved to German, discussing the philosophical implications of machine learning and artificial intelligence, using advanced linguistic structures and abstract reasoning that went far beyond basic language competency. The performance was extraordinary not just for its multilingual execution, but for its intellectual depth. She had demonstrated mastery of both languages and technical subjects that many adults struggled to comprehend in their native tongue. The conference room had fallen completely silent, except for Amara's confident voice moving between languages. Dev Patel was frantically taking notes, recognizing technical insight that could inform his company's AI development. Dubois was smiling with obvious admiration. Yamamoto was nodding along, confirming the accuracy of her Japanese explanations. When Amara finished and sat down, the silence stretched for several seconds before Ambassador Carlos Mendoza, one of the official judges, began applauding. Others joined until the room filled with recognition of what they had just witnessed. "That was remarkable," Mendoza said, his own multilingual expertise making him particularly qualified to assess her abilities. "I've worked with professional interpreters and diplomats for 40 years. What you just demonstrated represents exceptional talent combined with extraordinary dedication." Pemberton's face had shifted through several expressions during the demonstration: surprise, discomfort, and finally a grudging acknowledgement that he had been completely wrong. But his ego wouldn't allow simple admission of error. "Well, clearly you have some talent with languages," he conceded, his tone still suggesting this was less impressive than it objectively was. "Though I maintain that 12 languages is an unusual claim. Perhaps you're counting languages where you have conversational rather than true fluency?" The continued minimization despite overwhelming evidence triggered Dr. Tanaka's professional outrage. "Mr. Pemberton, Amara is the most gifted language learner I've encountered in my entire career. She doesn't just speak these languages, she thinks in them. Her abilities rival professional interpreters with decades more experience." But it was Marcus Jefferson, a young blogger who had been invited to document the scholarship competition, who would ensure Pemberton's dismissiveness became public knowledge. He had been recording the exchange on his phone, and the video of the CEO mocking Amara followed by her devastating linguistic demonstration was already being uploaded to his social media platforms. The confrontation that Pemberton had initiated to expose inflated credentials was about to expose something very different: his own prejudiced assumptions and the systematic ways that brilliant students from modest circumstances were dismissed by those who confused privilege with ability. While Amara endured CEO Pemberton's condescension in the GlobalConnect conference room, the demonstration was being live-streamed to unexpected audiences whose responses would transform the entire situation. Dr. Elena Volkov, the competition director who was monitoring all interviews remotely from her office, had been watching Amara's session with growing alarm at Pemberton's hostile questioning. At 50, Volkov had spent 3 decades in linguistics and international education, and she immediately recognized both Amara's exceptional abilities and the CEO's discriminatory treatment. "This is unacceptable," Volkov told her assistant, pulling up Pemberton's profile and the scholarship competition's official guidelines. "The CEO is conducting a hostile interrogation rather than a supportive evaluation. He's violating every protocol we established." Volkov began documenting the exchange, knowing that Pemberton's behavior would need to be addressed formally. But she also recognized an opportunity. Amara's demonstration of authentic genius was exactly what the scholarship was designed to celebrate, and Pemberton's skepticism made her abilities even more dramatic by contrast. At UC Berkeley's linguistics department, Dr. Tanaka's colleagues had been alerted to tune into Amara's interview. Professor Hans Weber, a visiting scholar from Germany who specialized in polyglot cognitive development, watched with amazed fascination as Amara navigated complex technical explanations across multiple languages. "Her German is extraordinary," Weber told his research team via video call. Not just grammatically correct, but intellectually sophisticated. She's using academic register appropriate for graduate-level discourse. At 17, this is the kind of talent we encounter perhaps once in a generation. Weber immediately began drafting a letter of recommendation that would go beyond Tanaka's already strong endorsement, offering Amara a research position in his lab if she chose to attend Berkeley. Meanwhile, Marcus Jefferson's video of the confrontation was already going viral on social media. The stark contrast between Pemberton's dismissive sweetheart comment and Amara's subsequent linguistic mastery created a compelling narrative that resonated across multiple audiences. Educators outraged by his condescension, language enthusiasts impressed by her abilities, and social justice advocates recognizing the racial and class prejudice underlying his skepticism. CEO mocks black teens' language claims, then gets absolutely destroyed by her genius, read Jefferson's caption, and the video was being shared thousands of times per minute across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Tech journalist Priya Sharma, who covered innovation and education stories, saw the video and immediately recognized its significance. She had been investigating GlobalConnect's diversity initiatives and their frequent failure to translate stated commitments into actual inclusion. Pemberton's treatment of Amara provided perfect evidence of the disconnect. This is more than one CEO being dismissive, Sharma told her editor. This is about systematic barriers that brilliant students from underrepresented backgrounds face, even when they have documented extraordinary abilities. I want to do a full investigation. At the International Rescue Committee office where Amara volunteered as a translator, Director Ruth Abrams was watching the live stream with growing pride and anger. Pride in her young volunteer's abilities, anger at how she was being treated. That girl has been translating for our refugee families in 6 different languages for 3 years, Abrams told her staff. She's helped dozens of families navigate medical appointments, legal paperwork, and social services. And this billionaire treats her like she's lying about her abilities? Abrams immediately began preparing a public statement about Amara's volunteer work, providing context that would further undermine Pemberton's skepticism and highlight the practical applications of her linguistic gifts. Back at GlobalConnect headquarters, VP Claire Dubois was having a very different reaction than her CEO. As someone fluent in 4 languages herself and responsible for the company's international operations, she recognized immediately that Amara's abilities were genuine and extraordinary. Rex is making a fool of himself, Dubois whispered to Dev Patel during a brief moment when Amara was answering a question from another judge. That young woman is demonstrating abilities that would be valuable in our international divisions, and he's treating her like she's wasting his time. Patel nodded agreement, already thinking about how to circumvent his CEO's prejudice. We should ensure she wins the scholarship regardless of Rex's personal opinion. Her technical understanding combined with linguistic ability could inform our AI translation development. The convergence of academic recognition, viral social media attention, journalistic investigation, and internal corporate support was creating a momentum that would overwhelm Pemberton's dismissiveness and ensure that Amara's talents received the recognition they deserved. The transformation in the conference room's atmosphere began with Ambassador Carlos Mendoza, whose 4 decades in international diplomacy had made him expert at recognizing both talent and prejudice. He had watched Pemberton's hostile questioning with growing disapproval, and Amara's devastating demonstration had convinced him to intervene. "Mr. Pemberton," Mendoza said with diplomatic firmness, "I must object to the nature of this interview. We are here to evaluate exceptional candidates supportively, not to interrogate them as though their documented abilities are fraudulent." The rebuke from a respected judge carried weight that Pemberton couldn't easily dismiss. Competition Director Dr. Volkov chose that moment to enter the conference room, having left a remote monitoring station specifically to address the CEO's conduct. "I've been observing this interview remotely," Volkov announced, her Russian accent sharpening with disapproval. "Mr. Pemberton, your questioning has violated the supportive evaluation protocols established for this scholarship. Ms. Okonkwo has demonstrated abilities that exceed most professional interpreters, and your continued skepticism reflects poorly on your judgment rather than her credentials. The direct confrontation from the competition director in front of other judges and executives created an uncomfortable moment where Pemberton's authority was being challenged publicly. His face reddened, but before he could respond, his phone began buzzing insistently with notifications. Executive Assistant Kenji Yamamoto leaned toward his boss and whispered urgently, "Sir, you need to see this. The video is going viral." Pemberton glanced at his phone and saw Marcus Jefferson's footage spreading across social media with brutal commentary about his dismissive treatment of Amara. The metrics were already catastrophic from a public relations standpoint. Millions of views, overwhelmingly negative reactions, and calls for GlobalConnect to address their CEO's obvious bias. VP Dubois, seizing the opening, addressed the room with strategic clarity. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess to allow the judges to confer privately. Ms. Okonkwo has clearly demonstrated exceptional abilities that deserve our full consideration." As Pemberton left the conference room to deal with the public relations crisis erupting on social media, the judges and executives who remained behind began an impromptu strategy session. "That young woman is exactly what this scholarship was designed to recognize," Mendoza declared. "Exceptional talent developed despite limited resources, demonstrating initiative and dedication that privilege cannot replicate." Dr. Tanaka provided context that the others lacked. Amara learned 12 languages through free online resources, community volunteers, and library materials. She practices daily across all 12 languages simultaneously. She volunteers as a translator for refugee families. And she developed her AI translation proposal based on understanding that current technology misses cultural nuance. She represents genuine genius combined with character. CTO Dev Patel was already thinking beyond the scholarship to professional opportunities. Her technical understanding combined with linguistic abilities could revolutionize our machine translation development. We should ensure she not only wins the scholarship, but also has opportunities to work with our research teams. The strategic consensus emerging among the judges was clear. Amara deserved not just to win the scholarship, but to receive additional recognition and opportunities that matched her extraordinary demonstrated abilities. Meanwhile, outside the conference room, Pemberton was conducting damage control with his communications team. The viral video was generating news coverage, with journalists already requesting interviews about GlobalConnect's commitment to diversity and inclusion. "This is a nightmare," Pemberton told his PR director. "How do we manage this?" "By acknowledging you were wrong and publicly supporting this remarkable young woman," the director replied bluntly. "Trying to defend or minimize what happened will only make it worse." The video evidence is unambiguous. Back in the conference room, Amara sat quietly while the adults discussed her future, processing the emotional whiplash of being dismissed and then celebrated within the span of 30 minutes. Dr. Tanaka sat beside her, offering quiet support. "You handled that with remarkable grace," Tanaka told her student. "Many people would have become defensive or emotional when questioned so dismissively. You simply demonstrated your abilities and let the evidence speak." Amara nodded, though she was still processing her feelings. "I've dealt with people doubting me before, but having the CEO himself mock me in front of everyone was harder than I expected." His doubt revealed his limitations, not yours, Tanaka replied. "And your response revealed your character as well as your abilities. That matters more than he understands." The turning point had been reached, from Pemberton's dismissive mockery to recognition of Amara's genius by those qualified to assess it accurately. What remained was the formal conclusion of the competition and the systematic changes that her viral moment would trigger throughout the educational and corporate world. When the interview panel reconvened 30 minutes later, the power dynamic had shifted completely. CEO Pemberton returned to the conference room with his communications director, who had provided him with an unfortunate reality check about the viral video's impact on GlobalConnect's reputation and his personal brand. Amara sat calmly beside Dr. Tanaka, having spent the break processing her emotions and receiving supportive messages from her mother, who had seen the video spreading across social media. Her composure contrasted sharply with Pemberton's visible discomfort. Competition director Volkov took control of the proceedings, making clear that the CEO's earlier hostility would not be allowed to continue. We will now proceed with the remainder of Ms. Okonkwo's evaluation according to standard protocols. The panel has additional questions about her scholarship proposal and her vision for applying multilingual abilities to technology challenges. Ambassador Mendoza led the questioning, focusing on Amara's practical experience using her languages. Tell us about your volunteer work translating for refugee families. How has that informed your understanding of language's role beyond simple word-for-word conversion? Amara's response demonstrated the depth of her linguistic philosophy. When I translate for families at the IRC, I'm not just converting words between languages, I'm bridging cultural contexts, understanding trauma-informed communication, and recognizing that how you say something matters as much as what you say. That's what current AI translation misses, and what I want to help develop. The intellectual sophistication of her answer impressed even the judges who had already recognized her abilities. She wasn't just a talented language learner. She was a thoughtful analyst of language's deeper functions. VP Dubois asked about her AI translation proposal. You mentioned training machine learning systems to recognize cultural nuance. Can you explain your technical approach? Amara outlined a methodology combining her polyglot knowledge with machine learning principles, explaining how human experts could create training datasets that captured not just literal translations, but contextual appropriateness across different cultural settings. Her technical knowledge impressed Dev Patel, who recognized insights that could inform GlobalConnect's actual product development. This isn't just theoretical, Patel noted. This is practical research that addresses real limitations in current translation technology. Ms. Okonkwo has identified problems our own engineers struggle with and proposed solutions based on her unique expertise. Professor Hans Weber, participating remotely from Germany, asked detailed questions about her German linguistic knowledge, testing whether her demonstrated fluency extended to historical development, regional dialects, and complex grammatical constructions. Amara's responses revealed depth that went far beyond conversational competence. She understood German linguistics at an academic level that would be impressive for graduate students. Throughout the questioning, Pemberton sat quietly, his earlier skepticism revealed as the prejudice it had been. The judge's obvious respect for Amara's abilities created an implicit rebuke of his dismissiveness that required no explicit statement. When the formal interview concluded, Volkov announced that the panel needed to confer privately about all finalists before making scholarship decisions. But before dismissing Amara, she made an unprecedented statement. Ms. Okonkwo, regardless of the scholarship competition's outcome, I want you to know that your demonstration today was the most impressive linguistic performance I have witnessed in 30 years of organizing this event. Your abilities are extraordinary, and your character in handling inappropriate skepticism was equally remarkable. As Amara prepared to leave, Pemberton finally spoke, his words carefully chosen under his PR director's watchful eye. Miss Okonkwo, I owe you an apology. I made unfair assumptions based on my own limited experience rather than properly assessing your documented abilities. Your demonstration was genuinely impressive, and I was wrong to question your credentials. The apology, while obviously motivated by damage control rather than genuine remorse, was at least an acknowledgement of error. Amara responded with dignity that exceeded the situation's requirements. Thank you, Mr. Pemberton. I hope this experience might encourage you to approach other candidates with more open-mindedness about what abilities can develop outside traditional privilege. The gentle rebuke, delivered without hostility, made clear that Amara understood exactly what had motivated his skepticism and what needed to change in his perspective. As she left the conference room with Dr. Tanaka, the power shift was complete. The brilliant black teenager who had been dismissed as a liar about her abilities had demonstrated genius that commanded respect from experts while exposing the CEO's prejudice to millions of social media viewers. Pemberton remained behind to face the judge's private discussion about his conduct. knowing that his moment of mockery had become a public relations disaster that would require significant effort to address. The teenager he had tried to diminish had instead diminished him, using nothing more than the truth of her extraordinary abilities. Within 48 hours of Amara's viral demonstration, the consequences rippled through educational institutions, corporate policies, and public discussions about recognizing talent regardless of socioeconomic background. What had begun as one CEO's prejudice became a catalyst for examining systematic barriers facing brilliant students from underrepresented communities. GlobalConnect's board of directors called an emergency meeting to address the public relations crisis created by Pemberton's dismissive treatment of Amara. The video had accumulated over 15 million views across platforms, with overwhelmingly negative reactions to the CEO's condescension and celebratory responses to Amara's linguistic mastery. This incident has damaged our brand's credibility on diversity and inclusion, Board Chair Margaret Shun told Pemberton during the 10th session. "We've spent years claiming to value talent from all backgrounds while your behavior demonstrated exactly the opposite. The board mandated comprehensive changes, immediate diversity and bias training for all executive leadership, revision of scholarship evaluation protocols to prevent similar hostile questioning, and a public statement committing GlobalConnect to actively recruiting talent from underrepresented communities rather than merely claiming openness to diversity." Most significantly, the board required Pemberton to publicly acknowledge his error beyond the minimal apology he had offered Amara privately. His statement, released through GlobalConnect's official channels, admitted his unfair assumptions based on appearance and background rather than documented abilities, and committed to learning from this experience to become a better evaluator of talent. The scholarly community responded with overwhelming support for Amara and criticism of attitudes that dismissed extraordinary abilities when they emerged from unexpected backgrounds. Dr. Elena Volkov published an editorial in the Chronicle of Higher Education analyzing how Pemberton's skepticism reflected broader patterns in academic evaluation. "We claim to value merit, yet our institutional structures systematically favor students from privilege who have access to expensive programs, travel opportunities, and prestigious credentials," Volkov wrote. Amara Okonkwo achieved mastery of 12 languages through free resources, community support, and extraordinary personal dedication. That her abilities were questioned rather than celebrated reveals how our assessment systems confuse privilege with talent. The editorial sparked a national conversation about talent identification and support, with educational institutions examining whether their scholarship programs truly provided equal access or merely rewarded students whose families could afford advantages. UC Berkeley offered Amara a full scholarship with additional research opportunities in the linguistics department. Professor Weber created a position specifically designed for her unique abilities, offering paid work developing multilingual cognitive assessment tools while pursuing her undergraduate degree. "She represents exactly the kind of innovative thinker we should be supporting," Weber explained to the dean. Her combination of linguistic mastery and technical understanding could advance our research in ways that traditional students, no matter how privileged their backgrounds, simply cannot replicate. The International Rescue Committee, where Amara had volunteered as a translator, received an unprecedented surge in donations after director Ruth Abrams published a detailed account of Amara's 3 years of service, helping refugee families navigate medical, legal, and social services in 6 different languages. While CEO Pemberton was questioning whether this 17-year-old could really speak multiple languages, she was using those exact abilities to help families fleeing war zones rebuild their lives in America, Abrams wrote in an op-ed that was widely shared. Her volunteer work demonstrates not just linguistic ability, but the character and compassion that should matter more than any credential. The technology sector experienced its own reckoning about talent evaluation. CTO Dev Patel used the incident to advocate internally for revising GlobalConnect's recruitment practices, which had historically favored graduates from elite universities with expensive computer science programs. Amara taught herself enough about machine learning and neural networks to discuss them fluently in 3 languages, Patel pointed out during an executive meeting. Yet our standard recruitment would likely filter her out because she didn't attend Stanford or MIT. We're missing exceptional talent by confusing expensive education with ability. Most significantly, the viral video sparked a social media movement using the hashtag #RecognizeGenius, encouraging people to share stories of extraordinary abilities that have been dismissed due to the person's background, appearance, or lack of traditional credentials. The movement generated thousands of examples of talented individuals whose gifts had been overlooked by gatekeepers who valued privilege over proven ability. Tech journalist Priya Sharma's investigation revealed that Pemberton's dismissiveness wasn't an isolated incident, but reflected broader patterns in how GlobalConnect evaluated scholarship candidates, hired employees, and assessed partners. Her exposé documented subtle bias throughout the company's operations, using Amara's experience as the most dramatic example of systematic problems. The consequences for Pemberton personally extended beyond professional embarrassment. His net worth decreased by $400 million in a week following the video's release as GlobalConnect's stock price dropped due to investor concerns about leadership judgment and corporate culture. The financial impact made clear that discriminatory attitudes had real business costs, not just ethical implications. For the other scholarship finalists, Amara's experience created a moment of reflection about their own advantages and assumptions. Several wealthy students who had previously felt entitled to win based on their expensive language programs recognized that genuine mastery required more than access to resources. It required the dedication Amara had demonstrated through years of self-directed study. The systematic consequences extended beyond punishing one CEO's bias to examining how educational and corporate institutions could better identify and support exceptional talent regardless of socioeconomic background. Amara's demonstration had exposed not just individual prejudice, but structural barriers that prevented brilliant students from receiving recognition their abilities deserved. 6 months after her viral confrontation with CEO Pemberton, Amara stood in a UC Berkeley linguistics laboratory, working alongside Professor Weber on research that combined her polyglot abilities with cognitive neuroscience to understand how the brain processes multiple languages simultaneously. Her transformation from dismissed scholarship candidate to celebrated young researcher had been remarkable, but perhaps more impressive was how she had maintained her humility and commitment to serving others. The GlobalConnect Scholarship, which she had won unanimously despite Pemberton's initial skepticism, provided full funding for her undergraduate education plus $100,000 for research projects. But Amara had used the platform to advocate for other talented students facing similar barriers rather than focusing solely on her own opportunities. My experience went viral because it was captured on video and involved a billionaire CEO, Amara explained during a TEDx talk at her high school. But thousands of brilliant students face dismissive attitudes about their abilities every day without cameras recording or social media attention. We need to change the systems that make those dismissals possible. Her advocacy had led to partnerships with organizations working to identify and support talented students from underrepresented communities. She helped develop assessment tools that evaluated ability rather than access to expensive programs, ensuring that students who learned languages through free resources receive the same recognition as those who attended elite immersion programs. The research work with Professor Weber was producing genuinely innovative insights. Amara's ability to think fluently in 12 languages allowed her to participate in cognitive studies that would be impossible with monolingual or even bilingual subjects. Her brain scans revealed neural patterns that advanced scientific understanding of language processing and multilingual cognition. Amara is not just a research subject, but a research partner, Weber explained to colleagues. Her introspective awareness of her own cognitive processes combined with her technical understanding allows her to contribute insights that push our field forward. Most meaningfully, Amara had maintained her volunteer work at the International Rescue Committee, now coordinating a program that recruited and trained other young polyglots to provide translation services for refugee families. The initiative had expanded to serve 3 times as many families while providing meaningful experience for students developing language skills. CEO Pemberton had undergone his own transformation, though more from necessity than genuine enlightenment. The board mandatory bias training and public scrutiny of his leadership had forced him to examine assumptions he had previously never questioned. While some doubted the sincerity of his conversion, his actions had begun to align with stated commitments to diversity. I've learned that my own path to success, elite education, family connections, and financial resources gave me advantages I had mistaken for merit, Pemberton wrote in a LinkedIn post that was clearly crafted by PR professionals but represented at least performative growth. Meeting Amara Okonkwo taught me that genius can develop anywhere, and my job as a leader is to recognize it rather than demanding it conform to my limited expectations. Whether sincere or strategic, Pemberton's public acknowledgement of his error had created space for other leaders to examine their own biases and evaluation criteria. Several CEOs had cited his experience as motivation for revising their company's talent identification processes. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had become a sought-after speaker on talent development and educational equity, using Amara's story to illustrate broader points about how institutional structures often failed exceptional students from modest backgrounds. Amara succeeded despite our educational system, not because of it, Tanaka argued during university presentations. Imagine how many other gifted students we're losing because they lack Amara's extraordinary self-motivation or don't happen to encounter the right mentors at the right time. The other scholarship finalists had maintained contact with Amara, with several acknowledging that witnessing her experience had changed their understanding of privilege and merit. Emma Johansson, the wealthy Connecticut student who had initially been skeptical about Amara's self-taught abilities, now volunteered with programs making language education accessible to low-income students. Watching Amara demonstrate abilities that exceeded anything I achieved with private tutors and study abroad programs forced me to recognize that my advantages didn't make me more talented. They just made things easier, Johansson reflected during a podcast interview. Most importantly, Amara had used her platform to highlight other talented young people whose abilities deserved recognition. Her social media presence featured regular profiles of exceptional students from underrepresented backgrounds, helping them gain visibility and opportunities they might otherwise lack. I was lucky that my confrontation was filmed and went viral, Amara told reporters covering her advocacy work. But luck shouldn't determine which talented students get opportunities. We need systematic change, so genius is recognized based on evidence rather than appearance or background. The transformation extended beyond individual success to institutional change that would benefit future generations of students whose extraordinary abilities emerge from circumstances that privileged gatekeepers might not respect. 2 years after CEO Pemberton's mockery inadvertently launched a national conversation about recognizing talent beyond privilege, Amara stood before a United Nations Conference on Multilingual Education, sharing insights from research that was transforming both academic understanding and practical applications of language learning. At 19, she had become the youngest researcher to present at the conference, but more significantly, her work was bridging theoretical linguistics with accessible education methods that could help students worldwide develop multilingual abilities regardless of their financial resources. 2 years ago, I was told by a billionaire CEO that my claims of speaking 12 languages were implausible for someone from my background. Amara began her presentation. Today, I'm here to share research proving that extraordinary linguistic ability can develop anywhere when students have access to proper methods, supportive communities, and personal dedication. Her research with Professor Weber had demonstrated that multilingual proficiency wasn't the exclusive domain of wealthy students with expensive immersion programs. The cognitive benefits and cultural competency that came from language learning could be achieved through free online resources, community partnerships, and systematic self-study, precisely the approach Amara herself had used. We've created open-source curricula based on principles that allowed me to achieve fluency in 12 languages using primarily free resources, Amara explained. These materials are now being used in 127 countries, helping thousands of students develop abilities that were previously thought to require privilege. The GlobalConnect scholarship had expanded dramatically following the publicity from Amara's viral moment. What had been a competition for 50 finalists had grown to support 500 students annually, with revised evaluation criteria that prioritized demonstrated ability over access to expensive programs. CEO Pemberton attended the UN conference, having been invited by Amara herself as a gesture of reconciliation and opportunity for him to demonstrate his stated commitment to change. His presence was controversial, but his remarks showed genuine, if belated, recognition of his error. Meeting Amara taught me an expensive lesson about the cost of assumptions, Pemberton told the conference audience. I nearly prevented one of the most talented young people I've ever encountered from receiving recognition she deserved. How many other brilliant students have been dismissed by leaders like me who confuse privilege with ability? The question represented genuine institutional self-reflection rather than defensive minimization. GlobalConnect had implemented comprehensive changes to talent evaluation across all programs, with measurable increases in recruitment and support for students from underrepresented backgrounds. UC Berkeley's Linguistics Department had established the Amara Okonkwo Fellowship for Multilingual Research, providing funding for students using language abilities to address global challenges. The fellowship had already supported 12 students whose work ranged from refugee assistance to developing culturally sensitive AI translation tools. Professor Weber had co-authored several papers with Amara exploring how her polyglot abilities informed understanding of language acquisition and cognitive flexibility. Their research was influencing educational policy in multiple countries, demonstrating that the benefits of multilingual education could be achieved far more accessibly than traditional programs suggested. The International Rescue Committee had expanded its volunteer translation program to 15 cities nationwide, training over 200 young multilingual volunteers to assist refugee families. Amara's model of combining language learning with community service had proven both effective for families needing support and transformative for students developing practical fluency. Most significantly, the hashtag Recognized Genius movement had evolved from viral hashtag to sustained advocacy organization. The Foundation Amara helped establish provided resources for talented students facing dismissive gatekeepers, connecting them with mentors, documenting their abilities, and ensuring their achievements receive proper recognition. We've supported over 3,000 students whose exceptional abilities were initially dismissed due to their background, appearance, or lack of traditional credentials, the Foundation's annual report documented. These students have gone on to attend top universities, receive prestigious awards, and contribute innovations their dismissive evaluators said were impossible. Dr. Elena Volkov had implemented the assessment protocols developed from lessons learned during Amara's experience across all international scholarship competitions she directed. The new approach evaluated demonstrated abilities through standardized assessments rather than relying on evaluators' subjective judgments influenced by unconscious bias. Amara's experience revealed how supposedly objective evaluation could be compromised by prejudice, Volkov explained. We've developed systems that make ability visible regardless of evaluator bias, ensuring that talent is recognized based on evidence rather than assumptions. For Amara personally, the journey from dismissed teenager to celebrated researcher had taught lessons that transcended her linguistic abilities. She had learned that prejudice often revealed the limitations of those who exercised it rather than those who experienced it, that character mattered as much as talent in transforming moments of injustice into opportunities for systematic change, and that using privilege, once gained, to advocate for others facing similar barriers was essential to creating lasting equity. As the UN conference concluded, Amara was surrounded by students, educators, and policymakers from around the world who wanted to discuss her research and advocacy work. Among them was a 15-year-old girl from rural Kenya who spoke 7 languages and had faced similar dismissiveness about her self-taught abilities. Your story gave me confidence to keep advocating for my abilities even when teachers didn't believe me," the girl told Amara. "Now, I have a scholarship to study linguistics in university because someone saw your video and started looking for talent in places they had ignored." Amara embraced the girl, recognizing herself 2 years earlier, brilliant, determined, and waiting for someone to look past assumptions to recognize documented genius. "Your abilities are real, regardless of whether others initially recognize them," Amara told her. "Keep demonstrating your talents. Find mentors who see your potential, and use whatever platform you gain to help others facing the same barriers." The legacy of one CEO's mockery and one teenager's dignified response had transformed from viral moment to sustained movement, ensuring that genius would be recognized based on evidence rather than prejudice, that talent would be supported regardless of socioeconomic background, and that the next generation of exceptional students would face fewer dismissive gatekeepers blocking their path to opportunity. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.